Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to our Tuesday evening Ask the Doc call. My name is Lynn Matthews. It is always such a pleasure to be here with you. And I know tonight many of you were just recently at the Changing Life and Destiny Conference in Texas. So welcome. You might recognize many of your friends' faces here, people who have been working with this. But we're going to be discussing a revolutionary way of approaching health and vitality. Most of us were taught, to deal with health challenges by looking at and then trying to mitigate symptoms, right? Which can be helpful, but it rarely addresses the root of the problem. And redox is changing all of that. It is changing the entire paradigm of wellness and vitality. If that's a new term for you, you are in wonderful company. It was for all of us on this call. Just know that redox is the energy that powers all life. Nothing happens in your body, my body, our pets' bodies without a redox reaction. It is an amazing communication network that not only protects your healthy cells, but helps your body detect, repair, and replace any damage anywhere. It's truly remarkable. And so tonight, we're going to talk about and explore not only what is redox, but why is it so profound and why might it be of interest to you? All right. And a little bit about the company behind this breakthrough. People come and explore this for a number of different reasons, and you might see yourself in one or more of these reasons. But most people come to look at this because they have a health challenge, or maybe it's a loved one, a friend, a neighbor, a family member who has a health challenge, and they're coming to look at this to see if it could be the missing link or something that could help them in their journey back to wellness. Others are here because they like to be proactive with their health, stop things from becoming a label given to them by their doctors. Still others are here because they've heard that there's some kind of athletic benefit to this and they want to explore that, the more endurance, faster recovery, more mental focus. And although there are absolutely, professional athletes using this, Olympic athletes using this, we don't have to be an athlete at that level to benefit from more endurance, faster recovery, right? Just having more energy at the end of our day to do the things we want to do, we can benefit from these things that this brings us. So we're going to look into that a little bit as well tonight. And then another reason people look at this is for the anti-aging benefits of redox. We're all 24 hours older now than we were yesterday at this time. But what if there was a way to turn back the clock, not only on the physical signs of aging that we see when we look in the mirror, but also what's happening on the inside? One of the things I love that Dr. Hoffman always reminds us of is that the wrinkles that we see on the outside are simply a reflection of the wrinkles and the oxidative stress that's on the inside, on our cells, on our organs, right? So what if we had a way to, in essence, kind of interrupt the breakdown of aging? And we're going to explore that tonight. The other reason that people look at this, and we don't have a lot of time on Tuesday evenings to go into this, but when there is a technology like this, a breakthrough of this magnitude that literally impacts every single person on the planet and all their pets, all the animals, there is an opportunity to make an impact in the world beyond the impact that you've already made in your lifetime. And if that's something that resonates with you, if you are curious about what it's like to be this amazing team of people educating people about this around the world, get back to the person that invited you. We'll talk a little bit about the people behind this company tonight, but on Saturday mornings at 10:30 East Coast time, one of Dr. Hoffman's colleagues on the same Zoom, same password, will be talking about and answering some questions about the product. And then at the top of the hour at 11 o'clock East Coast time, we kind of switch gears and Danielle Matthews will come on and she talks a little bit about what is it like to do this as a business? What is it like to be part of this team that is truly bringing a gift of humanity to the world? And so if that's something that's of interest, like I said, we'll talk a little bit about it tonight. The person who invited you can certainly share that with you. And on Saturday, we talk about it a little bit more. But tonight, I really invite you to just sit back and listen. Dr. Carolyn Hoffman is a dear friend and colleague. I don't know that our paths would have crossed had it not been for this remarkable breakthrough, but she is a traditional naturopath, board certified. She's been in that field for over 23 years, and she sits on the medical professional board for this company, and that's a volunteer position. But what I love about this is she brings not only decades of knowledge as a health professional to these calls, but also her knowledge from sitting on the board, where she kind of gets to pull back the curtain and see very close up what this technology is, and specifically these products. Why are they so profound? We call this Ask the Doc because we want you to be able to ask questions. So as she's going through her presentation, if you have some questions, go ahead and put them in the chat. And at the end, we'll come back and we will go through the questions. But I just have to put this one caveat out there. This company opted not to go down a pharmaceutical route. They went through the supplement into, that category, if you will. And so because of FDA rules and laws that govern that, we cannot address any specific disease names or conditions. So it's not that if you put them in there, we're not trying to avoid answering you, but we just can't. It's not compliant and we could get in trouble, and we want this technology to be able to be here 20, 30, 40, 50 years from now. So when you're thinking about your questions, perhaps think about more of the function of things that are going on in your body or the things that you're feeling, and let's help us address it that way. But for now, Carolyn, I'm going to turn this over to you.
That sounds great. Thank you, Lynn. Always does such a great job of spotlight and change over here. Let me just go to the speaker view. There we go. Oh, I've still got you there. How did you end up? Oh, let's pin you again. We'll pin the other way. There we go. All right. Excellent. Well, thank you for doing such a great introduction to what we always enjoy and have been sharing together probably for about 6 years now, each week. And so we want to thank people for taking the time to do this. I often will say that I think you're smarter than I was, because when someone first showed this to me back in 2011, I actually wasn't interested in really learning enough about it. So I'm glad that I did pay attention in 2017, because I will often say that in my experience of working right across the field with supplements and all sorts of different opportunities for supporting health, this is truly the most influential product technology I've ever had the privilege of working with. And that is because it is different than all the other things that we've tended to do since the middle of the last century, which sounds like a weird thing to say, but the 40s and 50s brought us supplements, and those are things that we digest and we have to do something with. Our body has to mobilize them. This is an entirely different way of looking at things, and if you're in the space that you've always felt, much like I kind of felt with my clients and our search for something, wouldn't it be amazing to be able to have one thing that would actually influence everything at the same time? That kind of felt like a big wish. But when we deal down and we dive down to this cellular level of conversation, that's exactly what we're going to do. So I'm going to share my screen with you and take this to full screen there so that I can share some visuals as well as talk through things. Everybody learns differently. And I hope by the time we get through this, what I will have managed to convey to you is that is just what we're talking about here is just as important as the air that we breathe, the water that we drink, the food that we consume, the sleep, and all the other things that are necessary for being alive, because this is where it sits. And we might think of this as the missing link. It was really the phrase that came to mind for me once I started to investigate the science behind why I was seeing such dramatic changes using this one technology that seemed to defy everything else that I've been working with for the last 20 odd years before that. And so I kept thinking, I wonder if this is the missing link, and it truly is the missing link, and I kind of will share why, to our health, our youth, and our vitality. And as Lynn said, if you haven't heard of it, you're not alone. Most doctors still don't even realize, not necessarily about redox, that is becoming more of a thing that certainly younger doctors and students are being taught about, but they're not aware of the development and the breakthrough of stabilization, which is what we're going to talk about. Just so that you understand and can couch this, even if you haven't heard of it, redox science has been going since the late 90s with 6 Nobel Prizes in this field. 24, 26 annual conferences in Paris, France, where the world comes together to share the latest and greatest in redox biology research. It is fielding and it is leading the latest approach to looking at health science for human biology. Now, of course, all of these places are trying to look at drug routes, and they're trying to understand the implication of these molecules that are in every single cell. But this gives you just a brief kind of scattering of the type of places that are looking at this field of research. And so it is an amazingly deep and wide field of science. So even if you haven't heard of it, the world is definitely out there doing it. So it's not new, it's been studied for decades, and it is critical force behind literally every single function in our body. So it's important. I'm sure that we probably all agree here that our health is very much everything, right? And I will tell you that it is hiding in plain sight beneath us, inside our cells. And that's where it all starts, at this cellular health level. Probably because our body is made of 70 to 100 trillion cells, and that makes up the organ systems of the human body. So this is just, we're just a big bag of cells, and if they're functioning beautifully, then we're going to experience that. But cellular health and cellular dis-ease, as we like to think of it, is found within our cells. And so we're really kind of only aware of the shift that's taking place within those cells below the surface when enough of them make a change and something then becomes a problem. It creates symptoms, and we're really aware of it above the surface, so to speak. If I can get this to move, this does not want to shift for me. Why is that? Let's see if we can get to the next screen. We'll do it that way. All right, and why is it I mentioned, you know, we can kind of think of, I like this visual basically because it really kind of represents the fact that, you know, our health is going on underneath the surface, and all those changes shift. But as they multiply up, then they become something that's above the surface that then doctors want to give a name and give a drug to. So these signals, really, the signals that are helping to keep us healthy, or whether the cells are damaged, is done through this communication, is done through these carrier messengers called redox signaling molecules. I like to think of this as the language of the human body. We might think of redox as being rather like the Wi-Fi system of the human cell. They're basically this invisible network that enables every single cell to communicate across in instantaneous messages. And when everything is working beautifully, they're going to help the body make sure that it knows how to repair problems, find damaged cells, you know, either repair or replace them, fight inflammation, which is essential and crucial and at the basis of all diseases, and also make sure that we can recover quickly. So our cells are going to send signals to each other to really fight the stress and recover and achieve and keep us in balance. We know that as health. Now, these signal carriers are actually made in the mitochondria inside every cell of the human body. Every cell, depending upon where it's based, is going to have a different number of mitochondria. Sometimes it's hundreds, sometimes it's thousands, but they are where the body generates energy that enables us to literally function, right? We can't think, nothing is going to work in the human system unless it's generating energy. Think about that. So we want to make sure that this is really at peak performance, because in that process of producing ATP, the energy of the cell, it also produces these reductants and oxidants, these signaling messengers. So if we imagine our body as running on that Wi-Fi, and if we get spotty Wi-Fi in our life in general, right, we know absolutely that messages are not going to go through on our phones when the Wi-Fi is bad. Communication doesn't happen. Everything gets messed up. It's no different than conversations. If they're not accurate, then we don't have good communication. And really everything begins to power down within the human body when these messengers are not working and when that is not at peak performance. And one of the other challenges that make that power down happen are things like pollution, for example, processed foods, poor sleep, and just all the stresses that we're all experiencing with modern life, because that scrambles these signals and really reduces our cellular communication. So we don't function at the same level of optimal health that we should do. Now, we can add into that challenge for this level of cellular communication, this natural loss of redox production, and it starts at puberty. We might think of aging as being 40s and 50s and beyond, but actually the clock starts ticking in puberty. Now, nobody's focusing on that. You don't really feel any of that. You only really notice that that's downregulated somewhat when you start to see that you don't look and feel quite the same in your late 30s as you did in your teens and your 20s. And the body can't make as many redox signaling molecules. And that results in this struggle to maintain basically cellular health and overall wellness. Now, until 2009, there was literally nothing that we could do about that. We could kind of support the body in general, but there wasn't any way we could rebuild our redox function and try to interrupt that gradual decline that is going to happen to all of us. And that is where this amazing moment comes in. I kind of think of this as where nature and science and pharmacy kind of all intersect. And it's through this groundbreaking science that Vertis Norton, who we'll talk about in a little more depth towards the end, he is the person who was responsible for the vision that ensured that 10 years of research that had already happened on these same molecules that we're all consuming today actually took the impossible, the not being able to stabilize them so that they had a lifespan of more than 10 minutes, into a possible, which was expanding them so that they had a lifespan of 12 months, now 21 months, because our science has developed so much more. And if it wasn't for his vision of the fact that this was a goal that should be achieved and wanted to get achieved, we wouldn't be where we are at, because what we have now is bioavailable, stabilized redox signaling molecules in a non-toxic, totally safe product, which impacts literally every cell of the human body in ways that vitamins and minerals, CBD oils, essential oils, and juices cannot do, because they don't contain the same redox signaling molecules as this technology. And that is really a watershed moment. If this hadn't happened, I don't really know where so many of us would be today, for sure, because science, despite the fact that they're putting so many millions of dollars of research into redox signaling, are not searching for a non-toxic solution. They're looking at how they could make a drug out of this. So what we have is the world's first and still only cell signaling supplement. This came to the market in 2009. It created this whole new category within the supplement industry worldwide. And Lynn kind of referenced that, we've been boxed into a supplement industry, but we actually don't fit there at all. It's kind of interesting to this day how we see that each community around the world views this technology very differently. In the United States, we're definitely, or North America, we're definitely in the supplement industry. So we have to follow the rules and regulations around things that are physical materials that you ingest and your body breaks down. That's not what our product does, and it's not a physical material. Now, in the European market, where we also serve this product, for example, it's actually considered a food, and we have to meet food regulation guidelines. Now, if you go to Taiwan further east, because we also serve 37 countries around the world, it's actually put into the category of a water. So we meet different kind of compliance tweaks that we have to do to be able to service different industries. But here we have something that has 7 patents, over 1,000 trade secrets, and from one location in Utah, we actually make and distribute and ship the product direct to every single customer around the world. We also have a 30-day money-back guarantee with lots of guidelines around how this is manufactured at the highest standards, which is a beautiful guarantee for us that what we're buying is actually redox signaling molecules. It's not just salt and water, which a lot of misleading Google searches will talk about because they don't understand the science behind it. And how do we know? Well, also we get third-party validation. All of our product is tested continuously and validated that what we have in there is actually bioactive redox signaling molecules. So for 15 years, the company ASEA has actually been making products that contain literally the same redox signaling molecules that our own bodies make. Now, if we weren't making them, we wouldn't be here on this webinar. We wouldn't be alive. We're going to go in about 3 seconds of not making redox. That's how essential they are. They're at the top of the food chain, so to speak, in everything else that happens from the body is predicated on an instruction, a redox signal to say this needs to happen, and the downregulated result is that we have life and health. So here's the facility that I mentioned. You can see all the different tanks, and this is a process that is not about those physical substances that we'll see in capsules and pills made from foods or such like. This is about chemistry. This is about bottling up something that the moment we consume it, we're like the catalyst that opens up the power of the energy of redox, and it goes to work within us. Now we got stalled out. There we go. Let's go back a second here for a second. So we think of redox as really the master switch that activates the whole keyboard of human health, and it's going to make sure that the body knows how to do the things that are important to keep us healthy, to protect us and solve problems. And that, of course, is what we want it to do all the time. We want to be healing on a minute-by-minute basis. I think my thing's decided to be pesky today. It doesn't want to move. So I think these is broad spectrum communication signals. Why is that? Because literally when we consume and rebuild our redox, just as the body is producing them, and it is going to signal to literally every cell. And I like to talk about this double-blind placebo-controlled genetic study, because genetic signaling and the maintenance of it at the peak level, which is what we need, is something that redox signaling molecules do naturally within the body. They maintain genetic expression. They make sure that we can do DNA replication, for example. We had an 8-week double-blind placebo study done by a leading genetic center. And they took healthy 35-year-olds and they checked out their level of genetic expression. And surprise, surprise, it was already down-regulating. Now, those 35-year-olds didn't say, wow, yeah, I absolutely felt that my genes were not signaling as well as they should do. Right? We don't interpret those changes that way, but the testing before they began the study actually proved that it was all beginning to downregulate, part of that aging process. They put the test group on 8 ounces of the ASEA Redox for 8 weeks. The placebo group had the plain saline that we begin with before it gets transformed into the redox signaling molecules. And I think there's 2 significant things to mention here. 100% of the people drinking the ASEA Redox had a 20 to 31% sustained and beneficial improvement in 5 gene signaling pathways. That's massive. I know from speaking to the scientists at the time, actually every gene improved, but genes are not that well mapped, or certainly back in 2017, they knew a lot less about them than they know now. So they talked only about the ones that were fully mapped. But those are really important for every single one of us on this call, regardless of whether you're here because you have a health issue, or whether you're here because you want to be preventative, or whether you're here just saying, you know what, I know as I get older, things are going to change. Let's be proactive. So if we look at what altered, improving immune system health, helping to maintain cardiovascular health with arterial elasticity, pretty important if you don't want to have strokes, for example. Improving gut health and digestive enzyme function, moderating hormone balance, and supporting vitality and wellness. The key to whether we can resist bacteria and viruses and environmental toxins means having a strong response to stressors at a cellular level. In other words, the capacity for a cell to be able to recognize when there's a threat, to be able to dodge that threat and protect us by mounting an immune response, and maintaining a healthy inflammatory response due to physical exercise. That's a fancy way of saying being alive, right? Just being alive, breathing oxygen, doing exercise, running around. We are all creating inflammation on a daily basis. And the job of a redox molecule is to recognize that, to get into those cells, to regulate that, and to solve the problem so that inflammation does not get out of control. So I'm sure you would all agree with me that those all are massively important if we want to maintain long-term health. I don't know if you've noticed on the slide, but the placebo group had a 0% response. So in other words, the genes had no influence whatsoever over anyone thinking that they might be taking something that could benefit them. So that's a pretty unusual statistic. Now, whether it's a 22-year challenge with being able to breathe and exercise, or 30 years of challenges with autoimmune issues that have devastated your life and you can't work and you can't think and you're hurting all the time and can't sleep, whether it's skin issues that have plagued you for many, many, many years, or whether it's losing hair and having hormonal dysregulation, but eventually being able to be told by your doctor you don't need medication anymore to be able to stabilize those hormones, or whether it's getting into retirement and finding that your hobby that you love you can't do anymore, which was skydiving, because you've injured yourself and your mobility is no longer what it was, but then being able to find your way back to being able to see that the rest of your retirement is not going to be just sitting there waiting it out. What brings all these things in common? When I mentioned that, I was definitely always looking for, on behalf of myself and my clients, the notion that wouldn't it be nice to have one thing that could affect everything, as opposed to cherry picking with supplements for something for the heart, or something for the liver, or something for the adrenals. Right? Instead of doing those symptom-directed things, let's go to the root of where problems sit in the cells. And so we can here actually influence every type of thing, which might seem pretty broad, right? How does one thing change breathing, or autoimmune, or skin, or hair, or hormones, or mobility? Well, it's because what brings those things in common is that we're able to support the body in fixing the damage to the cell. Again, this is not healing it's not itself is not a healer. Our body knows how to heal, but our body becomes dysregulated and it's unable to do that job as effectively as it used to when we were younger, because we had a lot more redox at that point. And we kind of all know that, if you're around children, or you've got kids, or you've got grandchildren, or just looking around at the differences between youth and aging, right? They heal much quicker than we do. They have a lot more sustained energy. They recover much faster than we do as we get older. And the common point is they have more redox and we don't. So therefore, to me, this makes kind of common sense. Now, this broad spectrum topical application can be done with our 5-year project called Renew 28. It's because our 28-day clinical studies show that we speed up skin cell turnover by 16% in 28 days. What that means is, right, we're combating the fact that at the age of 50, our skin cells are turning over at 90-day periods. In our youth, they're turning over at 28 days. So we help our body begin to feel and act the way it did earlier on in our life. And you can see those changes from the left to right screens in each example. Fine lines and wrinkles and elasticity and tone, all of those things change with using this product. So we love this for the skin benefits, and we've actually used it for discomfort for the last umpteen years, and we'll talk about the newest development in our science and how we're looking at things differently for things that specifically hurt. Now, that gene study had 5 genes. The inflammatory gene signaling pathway, like all genetic pathways, are cascading communication pathways. So we might think of it as inflammatory, but there are 15 pathways that it opens doors and sends signals down. And the key one, that pathway number 4, is this natural inbuilt system within the human body to produce antioxidants. Those are the most powerful ones we have. It's been well proven that taking multiple amounts of exogenous antioxidants in forms of supplements can actually be pro-oxidative. They can actually work against us and create more inflammation. The ones we want to be strong are things like our glutathione, superoxide dismutase, and things like that. And we naturally produce these, and those are the most powerful ones. I think of them as the sprinkler system within every human cell. When we have oxidation or inflammation that gets into a cell and it elevates the glutathione, the reductant piece of the redox is what helps to put that fire out. It's the response in the healing mechanism. But the fact that we have this here, we now invested for the last 4 to 5 years in research in this particular pathway because it is central to all diseases, right? I'm sure we all know there's been so much written about the fact that every disease creates inflammation and inflammation promotes more disease. So it would be kind of important. It's no different than a fire. We want to put that out because we don't want the damage that it creates. And so from looking at the study of our redox molecules, you'll find that in our liquid and our gel, we have one formulation, one set of species of redox, which creates this broad spectrum result. In other words, it activates all cells. But we wanted to look at what could we do if we could target just this inflammatory pathway and help the body really direct its energy in a different way as opposed to broad spectrum. And so what we created is this targeted redox communication activating that inflammatory pathway. From this, our studies at Bath University in England and also Western Australia looked at what we call that NRF2 expression, that antioxidant production. And we looked here at what is the normal baseline activation of a cell. And then we produced a product called Redox Gold that I'll talk about a bit more. And with an application of it, what we found was we were able to create a 160% increase in that targeted use of inflammatory signaling pathway. That's huge. In other words, we're really turning up those sprinkler cells and really spraying the inflammation at a much higher level to douse that deleterious effect that it has. We went one step further and we looked at the glutathione, that antioxidant production within the cells. We looked at a regular cell and we were able to see that we could increase that production of glutathione by 70%. We then went one step further and we said, well, you know, what would happen if we could compromise a cell, for example, and we could take down its ability to be able to produce antioxidants? And what we did here on the right-hand side, you can see we have it at 2% function, which is more or less kind of a dead cell if it's only at 2% function. But with one application of our newest product, we were able to raise that level by 280%. That's a phenomenal increase and makes a big difference in how we're really able to target challenges that need support in that inflammatory signaling route. We went one step further, and I'm going to go back here because this is having trouble tonight. And we then said, let's actually do some thermographic studies on what does the impact of heat regulation coming from tissue look like when we use our Redox Gold. And the top screens and everything that's pink and red and yellow and the pale blue-green up here are the level of heat that's escaping from the tissue, which is a sign of an increase in inflammation within the body. We applied the Redox Gold to it and we waited our statutory 15 minutes, which eliminates any errors in results. And we found that you can see in every single instance how much it reduced that level of heat, therefore helping the body target the inflammation that was going on. This is just 3 of the screens. I'm sure the friend who brought you to this evening's event can show you all the others, but this was a 100% result in every thermographic study that we had. Lynn mentioned athletes and why they use this technology. Well, we started with studies way back at Appalachian Human Performance Labs, and they use it because drinking the redox gives them a 29% increase in endurance and recovery. So how do we apply that to us? Well, what could we do if we had 29% faster in recovery and more endurance in our life? I mean, maybe there's things that you're not doing any longer because as you age, you just don't feel you have the energy or the endurance to keep doing them. So what would it be like if you could dial things back and actually feel like you did maybe 5 years ago, 10 years ago, or even 20 years ago? What else would you be able to achieve? Because that's the application that it means for us. Now, we aren't all going to become Olympic gold medalists, but I think what's important is when you have athletes at this level who recognize not only endurance, recovery, but sharper mental acuity and better performance, those things really matter to them. And when you have Olympic athletes that are using any kind of supplementation, you know that it has a lot of validation behind it in order for them to be able to consume it, because anything that could put their life at risk or their job at risk, their career at risk, obviously wouldn't be approved by their doctors. So to me, it's a kind of gold standard of it. I would tell you to go look at the Discover Redox page on the intro page. There is a link to the athletes. And if you scroll down and look for Sean Burke here, you'll begin to click on that and it'll take you to all of the variety of athletes using it with all of their examples of what it's doing for them. I really seem to have got a stalled out screen tonight. I mentioned that, we put a lot of money into research because we've created something that no one else has created. So we can't rely upon the market or even the science in terms of medicine to actually teach us what our product can do. And so for us, it's been a learning curve over these last 15 years, but you can see lots of examples of the benefits of taking this ASEA Redox can have for you. If you'd like to learn more about that, take a look at the discoverredox.com and you can go to the science page there and understand the kinds of research that we've been doing. So I mentioned the targeted redox communication. This is the gold. What makes it unique and very different from the Renew 28, this has a silica clay in it. And understand that what's tricky about redox is these are very volatile molecules. They need to go to work immediately. They're a bundle of energy. They want to give their energy away to a cell that needs more energy to make things happen. And it took 5 years to actually find something that wouldn't activate those molecules before we put it on the skin. The reason they came up with this was because people were spraying the liquid on their body for the first 5 years and getting lots of benefits. That gets pretty messy. So, they worked out how do we actually apply it in a gel. So this is a topical gel. And it's got amazing benefits for the skin and we all love it, morning and evening on our faces and everywhere else because it helps us stay younger. But it was looking at this and the liquid are the broad spectrum. So what helped us to target, kind of narrow down, use some different species of redox and narrow down like laser therapy and hit that NRF2 pathway, that inflammatory signaling pathway, was the use of molecular gold. So in this product, you probably can't see it on the screen, but we get a chance, have a look at it in the light, and you'll actually see flecks of 24 karat gold in there. This is part of what enables us to activate and laser the function of the redox in a very concentrated way to wherever you're going to apply it. This one is different from the other one. This one, part of what you need to do to activate it is to actually massage it into the skin for quite a while and keep massaging until most of it's gone away. that is part of what is going to help it activate, whereas the other one, you don't need to do that. And what this does, it's rapid relief. And then underneath, it triggers the cells to actually engage in long-term recovery. Right? Body is meant to heal, it is meant to recover. And what we're doing here is to enhance and reactivate some of these processes that have slowed down. So if you've got something that hurts you, maybe it doesn't move so well, range of motion, this is an amazing product to use. Not only can most people feel it sometimes within spooky fast times like seconds, sometimes minutes, but repeated applications are going to help your body trigger that capacity to recover itself and solve problems long term. And so here's a kind of broad overview of the two different products. One is to combat appearance of fine lines and wrinkles, improve hydration, elasticity. And remember, we're all over as our skin, right? So it's not just about the face, even though most of us love it for the things that people see the most of us. That encourages that 28-day skin renewal. But on the left, the Redox Gold is about helping us relieve tightness and tension, preparing the body for activity. So if you're going out to do something that's strenuous, put it on beforehand. It's going to help your body recover much quicker, so you won't be struggling with sore muscles afterwards. It alleviates discomfort. It's going to soothe those kind of tired, overworked muscles and provide rapid relief. So it's targeted, whereas the other one is an all-over action. So our health really is everything, but it starts at this foundational level by rebuilding the powerhouse within every cell. And that we do with the Redox liquid. The Essentials Pack is a really well-structured, regular monthly amount to be consuming. This is the equivalent of our clinical study amounts that we do. And this really engages, for most of us, the way to really support today's oxidative stress, in other words, getting older every day, but also help revitalize, re-energize the body to be able to address maybe chronic conditions that you've brought with you over time, things that you would really love to change and would like to get out of your life so that you can get back into your life. And this gives you a 30-day supply. It also provides you with a free tube of the Renew 28 and has free shipping. And so it's a very popular way to get going. We want you, when you do this, that even though you may have one or two or even three things that you may have identified that you want to change, we want you to benchmark everything about your health. I mentioned, as I said, this is broad spectrum. In other words, it's going to go and work everywhere in the body. And the body has this innate intelligence. It knows what the priorities are below the surface. We don't necessarily, we may think we do because something may be bothering us an awful lot, but the body may actually innately know that something else that's changing below the surface that we may not yet be aware of is actually of a bigger priority. So it's kind of tricky because we say, well, I've got bad joints, or, I've got a heart issue that I want to focus on. And maybe the body's saying, you know what, we got to go work here because this is actually the priority. And when we finish here, then we'll get back to the things that you're wanting. So benchmark everything about your health. Start at the day one before you begin the product, and then repeat that a week later. Pay attention, because you might be wanting your joints to improve, but maybe your stress has dropped. Maybe your energy has improved. Maybe you're sleeping better. Maybe you're thinking more sharply and have better memory already. Those might be the signs that your body's already directing it somewhere else. If you see nothing, and probably 85% of people are not going to see anything in that first week, we suggest you double up and go to at least that 6 ounce, if not 8 ounces a day, and keep doing that until you begin to see where your body's making changes. Continue to track those changes at 2 weeks, at a month, at 2 months, 3 months. Know that it's 4 months before the body's going to have replaced every blood cell. Right, so we know that most people are seeing massive changes by the time they've got to 3 months in. 90% of people are super excited. And we want you to think about not this quick fix notion, right? We didn't get here in a week or a month. Anything chronic has been around for years, and the body is the one that's going to have to do the work to repair it. And so we want to support the body and give it the time to make sure that it can show you what it's capable of, and you're going to feel that across all sorts of things. I will tell you that the longer you're on it, if you keep benchmarking, you might see, you know, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 things in the beginning, and then 3 months later, something else suddenly changes, and 3 months later, something else changes. It is a story that we all go through. Let me go to this one because that's not going to move. So replenishing the loss is really, you know, something that is going to vary from person to person, and you're going to have to find exactly the amount that you need. Maintenance requires less, but chronic and serious challenges or deficiencies will definitely need more to refill that glass. And once you've got that there, then you can find out what's it going to take for you to maintain your health. Everybody has a different response, and that's kind of the unique thing that your friend will be able to help you work through. You know, redox signaling molecules are how we can recharge our cells at any age. I show this because Rosie's remarkable journey backwards in time is why I started out by saying that this is the single most influential product technology that I've ever had the privilege of working with. There is truly no other supplement on the market that can do what this does, that takes somebody at 84, moves them 7 years on, makes them look at least 10 years younger, right, in their 90s, right? And that is because all these other supplements on the market don't contain the ASEA Redox molecules. And so I think this is such a beautiful way of demonstrating that we can help to reset the clock. We can help to interrupt that natural breakdown of aging that is going to happen to all of us. And sadly, Lynn reminds us every week that we're another week older than we were currently. That we can't stop. Right? We can't stop chronological aging, but we can do something to alter biological aging inside and see those results. If you're curious about more how redox interacts throughout the human body, redoxscience.com is a great place to go to. We have a Facebook group that you can listen and see other people's experiences. They are wide, just as I showed you with that fix the cell slide. And we have all of these recordings of interviews that we do every week, and you can take a look there and you'll see all sorts of examples. I'm going to move over to the ASEA ethos that we mentioned at the beginning, because our mission within this, and I think what draws people who have a heart to help other people, is that they do want to support people to have a better life. And we want to be a force for good in the lives of others and around the world. And that is really what drives our mission. It may be something that you choose to want to become part of, not necessarily now, but maybe later on. I think everybody has their own journey in it. And I'm going to stop the screen here, and I'm going to ask Lynn to come and talk about that side of things. She does a beautiful job in helping us think about this other side that we often say is just as important as the product, right, Lynn? Oh, you're on mute. You're on mute, Lynn. I can't hear you.
I got it. Sorry. Yes, it is absolutely, I believe, and I know you believe, as important as the products. You know, Dr. Hoffman mentioned Burtis Norton and this intersection of science and nature and pharmacy. Burtis Norton was a visionary. He was a strategist. He had done a lot in the Fortune 500 world, actually the Fortune 50 world, mentoring a lot of CEOs. When he retired, he was asked to sit on the board of this little company that had this liquid made from salt and water that was doing these, you know, amazing things. They were going on this drug path, but they could not figure out, they didn't know the mechanism of action, and it didn't have a lethal dose, an LD50, which, if you're familiar with FDA and drug trials and drugs, every drug has to have that. And it's an amount at which 50% of the animals they're using to test it, unfortunately, die. And then they take that amount and they back it up so it's safe for humans. Well, this liquid didn't have that. And so they couldn't make it a drug. And they had spent millions in safety studies. And when Virtus Norton was asked to come in, they were trying to get more investors. And they couldn't get investors, but they had given him some of this for himself to try as a board member. And he was having some really great results at the age of like 68, 69 years old with his own health. And so he just intuitively knew they had something there. Ultimately, that company got bought out. And as they were selling off the pieces, he put together a team of investors and bought the technology, bought all the previous research for it, put a team of scientists together to figure out what it was. They realized it was redox molecules. And like Dr. Hoffman said, they were able to then stabilize it. But for him, it was a business play. He thought he'd stabilize it, flip it, sell it to a pharmaceutical company, and go back into retirement. And so he got 40 people to be his focus group, all different levels of health challenges. These were, neighbors, family members, people from church. And 6 of those 40 had health challenges that were serious enough that they were told to get their affairs in order. So these 40 people had unlimited access to this liquid. He's in conversation with a pharmaceutical company that was very, very interested in the technology. And after 2 months, he went back to these 40 people and only to find out that it had turned into 120 people. These people were giving it to their friends and family. They were shipping it to 20 different countries because they were having such a great benefit. And those 6 people who had been told they had X number of days to live seemed to be thriving. And so that was happening in the background. And this pharmaceutical company said, we're going to give you a large check because what you have here is astonishing. But basically, the caveat to you taking this check is that you need to shut down this whole thing. All those people that are on it need to come off it. And I don't know what any of us on this call would do. This was legacy money, tens and tens of millions of dollars. But he told them, he said, you know what? Ethically, morally, those 6 people, of all those people, I can't take this away from them. And so he turned down that offer. And that was the beginning of the legacy and the culture and the ethos of this company that we all have come to know and love called ASEA. He wanted this to be his legacy to mankind. He understood how profound it was, and he wanted to be sure that people like you and me had access to this forever, and that it was not something that a pharmaceutical company was going to either shelve or just put into like one little category for a specific disease. And so he decided at the age of 69 to come out of retirement. He founded this company called ASEA, and he was looking at different ways to bring it to market. He knew that you couldn't just put this on a shelf because, as Dr. Carolyn showed us earlier, people look, we've been trained to look at labels. And when you see just sodium and chloride and water on the label, people are like, well, I can just mix up salt water in my kitchen, right? They don't understand redox yet. And so he realized that it needed education, like our Ask the Doc calls. People who have used it, people who have experienced it, people who can share it so that others can understand what it is. And so he chose this method, word of mouth marketing, network marketing. But he also knew that this industry didn't always have the most stellar reputation. And so part of what he wanted to do was kind of raise the bar and make sure that people, principles, and purpose always came before people's egos, before the economics of it. And because they're privately held, they don't answer to stockholders, right? So it's not all about the bottom line and profit. Obviously, they are a business, they need to make money, but it is always run through the filter of how can this best benefit people before they go through to the bottom line. And I've watched that. I've been involved now 11 and a half years, and I've watched that play out in their decision making over the years. This is a company that truly values people. It is not about a transaction. In fact, most people, if they're coming here just to sell something, they don't last, because it's all about the heart of having, how do we serve the person in front of us, right? How can we cultivate relationships and so that it's a transformative interaction and not just a transactional interaction? And I think that really sets this company apart in a world where there's a lot of corporate greed. Not only do we have a product that is life-changing, unique, there's nothing like it on the planet, but also a corporate staff behind it that truly thinks about people and how we can change humanity. So on Tuesday nights, we get a few minutes to talk about that, which I'm always grateful for, because I think whether you're going to try this for your own health or a friend's house, or whether this is something you're thinking about bringing into your business or wanting to share it, I think it's important to know who stands behind this, because it does make a difference. So if you want to dive more into the business, I think I saw Carolyn put something in the chat about Saturday morning, when Danielle does go into, what is it like to do this business? Go there on that day or talk to the person who invited you. But right now, I think I only saw one or two questions, I think, Carolyn. So I'm going to turn it back over to you and we'll get the questions answered because we're coming up on the top of the hour.
Yeah,